Welcome to the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast. And today I'm very delighted to say we are joined by Phil Putnam. Phil, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on. I'm super happy to be here.
Great to have you here all the way from New York City, or New York as well, I believe. But
Yes.
just for the listeners and people tuning in, and for those that may not know who you are, please give us a brief snippet introduction into who you are, Phil, and what it is that you do.
Sure. I am the person I'm the stranger that you will walk up to in an airport and tell all of your deepest, darkest secrets to. That's basically what I am. So that may sound like a strange place to start answering that question, but it's deliberate because throughout my entire life and still today in my profession, my strongest skill is I make people feel safe. And that makes me a really effective teacher and coach and somebody who specializes in not only motivation and performance in work, but also professional development. I call that out because one of my main thing that I do is I teach skills workshops and I speak at conferences and do keynotes and really, expand people's skills. And I like to do it in group settings, right? Well, if you're going to be willing to learn in the presence of your peers and your leaders, that requires humility on your part, and it requires vulnerability. And I've always been really, really an expert at guiding people through vulnerability and making them feel comfortable with that. So that's what really kind of guided me into the profession that I have now.
Brilliant. Love it. So safety, humility, vulnerability, we'll come on to all of those things in a lot more detail shortly. But I'm particularly interested, as we always like to on this podcast, is go back to just the beginning to understand how you even entered the wonderful world of sales in the first place. So what did that journey look like for you?
Sure. Well, it really started with my music career. So I used to be a singer-songwriter and recording artist, and my bachelor's degree is in music. So my university degree is, focused on music. And I wanted to stay independent as an artist, partly because frankly, I wasn't good enough to get a recording contract, but also because I wanted to write songs more than I wanted to perform them. So I was able to do that while I worked a regular job. And it just so happens that my first big regular job was working for Apple. And so there's an element of sales in all of that. There's also an element of sales in trying to market yourself as a product when I was a musician. So these two things just kind of naturally came together. And then the quirk of it, though, is that in terms of how I entered into sales as a function, as a profession, I actually worked my way in reverse through the customer journey throughout my career. So I started in customer success. I started in post-sale, which has a heavy sales element to it as well with renewal and expansion. And then went into pre-sales and technical selling, and then went into sales enablement and working directly with sellers. And all along the way, I was selling, whether it was typical transactions or whether it was getting my ideas across and getting my programs embraced by my leaders. So there has been an element of sales pretty much in everything that I do.
Wow. What type of music was it you wrote and performed, Phil?
Like Elton John, Ben Folds, David Gray type stuff. So piano-based acoustic pop rock with really soul-searching lyrics. Yeah. It's very much please understand me. That's what it is. Yeah.
Great. Big fan of David Gray, actually. Need him to release a few more tour dates. Would love to go and see him live.
Have you never seen him live before?
Never seen him live, no. What's he like?
God, he is amazing. So I've seen him twice, both times in New York. And both times I have never in my life seen a musician so completely locked in to their performance from the first moment. It is remarkable to watch. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Anyone listening, you've got two big fans of David Gray here. Definitely go and check him out. Got some absolute bangers, so to speak. But coming on to the journey then that you've mentioned, obviously kind of been exposed to all different elements of the sales process, technical, pre-sales, working directly with the sellers. What's kind of led you to your area of expertise now, which is very much leadership, essentially?
Sure.
What kind of led you to that?
Yeah, well, what led me to that is that I'm such a caretaker at heart. I just want to take care of people. And if I'm being honest, I'm not very competitive at all which is not what you typically associate with a revenue leader or a sales leader. But I really don't care about winning or losing. I just want to take care of you. But because I'm such a skilled caretaker, my teams win. Because business results come from the people. They don't come from the processes or the products or the strategies. So the reason I got into people leadership after a very long career as an individual contributor was because I started to understand it as a way of taking care of people that I hadn't tried yet. And once that idea really took hold for me, which was roughly in 2019, I couldn't get away from it. It became inevitable that I was going to go into leadership. And I had a particularly odd journey into people leadership where I went from being an individual contributor to being an executive overnight. So my first leadership job was as a vice president. And because it came quite late in my career, so I had all the skills necessary. But what I didn't have is the years of growing through middle management that a lot of leaders have who then become vice presidents and C-level executives like me. Yeah.
What was that like then? Because I can imagine it's a big jump. Although you had the skills, a big jump going to that pretty much overnight. How did you find it, and how did you deal with the transition?
I have to say, with gratitude, it actually was not as difficult as I thought it was going to be. My natural disposition and my natural people skills make me a very strong fit for people leadership, but I didn't know that, at the start. So I kind of crash coursed a little bit, but I don't think I flailed as much as I would have if I wasn't really, really strong in my people skills. And then there's one piece of advice I got from the CEO that hired me into that VP role that really was formative. And he said, look, it was the last interview in the process. And it was the end of the interview. And he says, look, we're going to offer you this job. Like, you will have an offer within the next 2 days. So it's yours if you want it. We want you to accept it. But I want you to understand something. If you accept this job, you will become one of a very small handful of people at sort of the top of the chain here who are most responsible to take care of our people. That is your job. And if you are going to do that, you have to speak up. You cannot be shy. You have to be bold. You have to speak up. And he really read me accurately in that moment. And I think he really understood the nuance in me between me being naturally mouthy. I have no problem being opinionated and sharing my opinions. But what he was describing was something so much more deliberate and so much more artful. And I really understood that he was saying you have to be a really vociferous advocate for our people. And they are the pathway to our business success. And so after about 3 or 4 months in the role, I really started to understand what he meant. And I just decided, okay, saddle up. No matter whether it makes me feel uncomfortable or scared, I am now going to just start being bold. And it really transformed me as a person, to be honest. Now there's really nothing I will not say to any leader of any level. I will say it kindly. I will say it artfully, but I will gracefully slip the knife in, and you will thank me for it.
I actually want to touch on that because it's really interesting. I think one of the difficult tasks that a seller or leader or anyone in the sales world can have is the ability to deliver difficult messages or have tough conversations. Sure. And what you mentioned then was quite interesting. And you are comfortable doing it, but there's a skill, there's a way to do it. For anyone listening to this that has to have a difficult conversation with either their manager or vice versa, what would your advice be on how best to approach that?
Well, the first piece of advice is that you earn the ability to have that difficult conversation go well by how you treat people in every other interaction leading up to it. So it's not really, how you approach the specific interaction does matter, but what really matters is how have you conducted the entire relationship? Trust is built over time, and trust is basically built with repeated, reliable action over time. You can't rush it and you can't command it, right? You can command compliance, but you cannot command trust. So if you have not built trust, and then you've got to go to one of your team members and deliver difficult messaging, well, sorry, manager, but it's your fault if the ground has not been laid for that conversation to go well. Yeah.
repeated, reliable interactions. Really, really like that. I think that's so true in being able to build trust with the people that you work with. We're kind of segueing the conversation now into all things leadership. That's going to be like the key topic of today, but more so how we could motivate sellers. So this could be an interesting topic.
Yeah.
Even for those that aren't in a leadership role, because there might be ways you can get more out of your manager or leader, and vice versa, leaders, how you can get more out of your team. So as we go into this topic, Phil, what are the kind of takeaways you want anyone listening to this episode to really take away afterwards and be able to implement into their day-to-day job?
Totally. The biggest takeaway I want leaders, or anybody who's listening, but especially frontline managers, people who are people leaders in any industry, to take away is that the number one reason why anybody on your team works in the first place is to get the life they desire in exchange for the work that they do. Their number one career goal is not to make your business successful. Your business's success is their number two motivation at best. So when you try to motivate their performance based upon how it will make the business more successful, what you're actually asking for is second place results at best. If you don't want second place results, then I've got the solution for you.
Well, let's unpack the solution, Phil, because no one wants to settle for second best. So you mentioned then the people that you are leading or managing, quite rightly, their number one objective or motivation isn't the business's success. As you said, it's second at best. So for any leaders and managers listening to this, how do we really understand what the number one motivator is, and how do we unlock the life that the people in our team want?
Sure. Well, it's something that any great seller is excellent at and does every single day. It's just discovery. If you want to know the information, you ask. That's all it is, right? And so in specific in this topic we're talking about, if you want to know how to get top performance out of your people on a regular basis with a minimal amount of friction, you need to first accept the truth that the number one thing that motivates them is their ability to get the life they want from the job they have. And if you want to leverage that as a source of that kind of motivation, and then the incredible performance and the incredible business results that come from that, you need to discover what that life is. So I did this when I was leading teams, and that's where this whole methodology of desire-based leadership came from. And so I just had to common sense it one day, because I was like, okay, I got a big mandate, got a short time frame, got big results to deliver. Very common story, right? I'm sure lots of listeners are nodding along like, yes, that's my life. So I had to just figure out very quickly, how do I get what I need and what I want from my team members? And I realized, of course, the best way to get what you want from somebody is to give them what they want. So when I was interviewing candidates for jobs on my team, or when I was inheriting and taking on new team members that I didn't know yet, and then also with all my coaching clients still today, I'd say, hey, let's set aside the job for a second. And as much as you feel comfortable, it's completely voluntary, but as much as you feel comfortable, just tell me the details of the life you're trying to get. Like, what do you want to have? Like, tell me about your lifestyle. Where do you want to live? Where do you want to spend your time outside of work? Who do you want to spend it with? Do you need to relocate? What's your favorite vacation? That kind of stuff. Let's talk about income. Let's talk about your relationship with money. What purpose do you want money to serve in your life? Is it just about amassing wealth for you? Or do you want it to increase your peace of mind, right? What are your thoughts on retirement? How does money make you feel? How do you want it to make you feel? Then let's talk about your feelings. Most people, want their life to make them feel mostly good and mostly not bad as they live it every day. So what are the specifics for that person? And also, since you're spending more of your waking hours at work or thinking about work than any other activity in the world, including your family, your children, your pets, your hobbies, anything, how your job makes you feel is going to be a major factor in whether you're getting the life that you desire. And then last, let's talk about your employment. How do I need to relate to you as your leader to give you the day-to-day professional well-being that you expect and need from your job? And what I did right there is I actually laid out the acronym of the discovery model that I've created. It's called the Life Motivation Discovery Model. So L is lifestyle, I is income, F is feelings, and E is employment. And then, so I would do this, and I would have this conversation, and I've got my framework, because who doesn't love a framework? So I would be jotting this down. I'd be filling this out as the person is talking with me. And I would share it on the screen, so they would see exactly what I was writing, and I'd ask them, is this accurate? Is this representing you, right? Is this expressing you on this page? And they'd say yes. And then after the conversation's over, I would honestly analyze, okay, for them to get this life that's on their life motivation profile, what do I actually have to provide for them? This is the life motivation analysis, right? So here's a good example. If you were running the model on me and you asked about my lifestyle, one thing I would tell you is that I want to live in New York City at least until the end of my career, potentially to the end of my life. And so what you would analyze as my leader is that, hey, good news, I don't have to facilitate relocation for Phil. However, I do have to pay him in line with the New York City cost of living and job market. So that's how the profile and the analysis relate to each other. And then the final step in the process for a leader is to honestly assess if you can give the person the life that's on the analysis within the constraints of your business. Because if you can, that's party time, right? Because they're going to know that they can get the life they want from the job they have, and they will be fundamentally motivated to bring their best performance to your business every day with a minimal amount of friction. But if they conclude that they can't get the life they want from the job they have, they will disengage, their performance will dip, and they will eventually leave your company if you can't give them what they need. This is not surprising. This is just the path of human nature and the way humans relate to their relationship with employment. And the real problem for this is that when someone leaves and you have to replace them, it costs a business anywhere from 5 to 12 times more to replace one person than it does to satisfy them. So the business case and the financial case that underpins all of this is the fact that the cost of attrition is absolutely crippling to the profitability of any business, and the pivot to prioritizing satisfaction rather than attrition is actually self-funding. Like, I can run the numbers for you on this very easily and show you that for the cost of replacing one person in today's market, you could satisfy 15 people. I mean, some companies have fewer than 15 people total. Like, you could stabilize your entire workforce and still have more cash on hand by avoiding one attrition, one replacement. It's revolutionary.
Wow. If you don't mind, we're going to get quite granular into some of the things that you've mentioned there, because it's quite interesting. Love the framework, and we completely agree the cost of attrition is monumental, especially versus the cost of just keeping people happy and satisfied. Yeah. So let's go into that scenario you mentioned where you do the life framework, you do the analysis, and you actually come to the conclusion that you maybe cannot give that person what they want or to give them access to the life that they want.
Sure.
But I'm a leader. I've got, like you said, the cost of losing someone is also really high. It could take me months and months to replace someone. As a leader, what do I do in that situation?
If you cannot give somebody what they desire from their job, you need to help them move on, and it's best to do it quickly. That's the bottom line. See, attrition is inevitable. So I'm not proposing that attrition is going to be wiped out entirely. What I'm saying is that when you run the process of discovery that I've just described, you're going to come to a conclusion, which is that there's either a fit or there's not. Same exact process when you're qualifying a lead for an opportunity, right? We know this process inside and out as sellers and sales leaders, which is why we're actually uniquely positioned to be really, really good at it, because we already do it in our day-to-day business. So if they cannot get the life they want from the job they have, you should proactively support them finding a different role. Ideally, they can find another role within your organization that does give them the life that they want, and then your company will avoid the cost of a peer replacement And you'll also retain their institutional knowledge. So that person ideally would become a top performer in their new role because they can get the life they want from the job they have. And then you would still have to pay the cost of bringing in somebody else, but you're going to pay less overall cost, because if you say you move that person to a new role within 2 months rather than 10 months, well, for the entire time that they realize they can't get what they want, but they're still in the job on your team, they're going to be bringing down your team's results, which is bad for them. It's bad for your business. And it's bad for you as a leader, because your job as a leader is to deliver the success of your team to your larger business. And you've got this person dragging down your results. So that's the ideal outcome, is if you can move them to another role within your team that they'll find really satisfying. The other option is that they need to go to a different company. And if that's the case, I encourage leaders to proactively and supportively and positively help them move on quickly. Those are the positive outcomes, right? And of course, the first and most positive outcome is that they can get the life they want from the job they have. So let's say that you discover that they can't get the life they want from the job they have. The first thing you can do as a leader is ignore it. The first thing you can do as a leader is never ask at all. So that's believe me, that is the least worst thing. The other two are so much worse. So we'll start with the least worst. You just never ask. So you have no idea if your people are satisfied or how to satisfy them, or if you can rely on their performance. You have no compass to use when their performance dips, and you have no way of ensuring that you can meet your mandate as a leader. That's the least bad outcome. The second worst outcome is that you do ask, you discover they can't get the life they want, but you do nothing about it, right? So what happens is that things naturally degrade over time. They leave and you pay the cost of replacement, and it takes a long time. So you end up paying overall a much larger cost than you would if you had proactively moved them out quickly. The third is the absolute worst outcome. And this is just straight up manipulation. And this is where the leader discovers the person can't get the life they want from the job they have, but the leader decides, I don't want to put up with the ass ache of replacing this person. So I'm actually going to lie to them and say they can get the life they want from the job they have, or I'm going to attack their sense of self-worth so that they are willing to accept something that they know will not give them what they want. Both of those approaches, manipulation or lying or attacking self-worth, that is completely disgusting human behavior. If you do this, you are just wrong.
Completely agree with that last outcome for sure. But I think one thing you mentioned around support, if you can't give someone the life that they want, actively supporting them in finding a new role, I think that would be a real shift in the mindset of the current state of play and what current managers do. So what advice or thoughts would you share on to try and change someone's mindset or thought process to actually act like that? 'Cause
sure.
I could be wrong. I'd be very surprised if that does happen currently.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing I do is I talk to somebody about what they want, right? So every leader, C-level on down to frontline manager, we're employees too. We have lives that we want to get from the jobs we have. And so the first thing I do is I share that basic idea with them, which is, hey, you work to get the life that you want, correct? And of course they agree, because it's a basic human truth. And when you hear it, whether you've realized it previously or not, you light up, it's real. So that's where I start. Basically, I sell them. I'm a seller, right? So I say, hey, this is a basic human truth. You feel that it's true inside of yourself. Of course, it's true for your people as well. Do you agree? Yes, I agree. Okay. Do you want the best results from your people that you can get? Okay. Yes. Then why are you continuing to try to motivate their performance based on their relationship to the company's success, when what you've just told me confirms that you know that the most reliable pathway to their top performance is by giving them what they want? And then I turn the corner and I say, can you explain to me the business logic and the financial logic of trying to keep somebody on your team for a long period of time who knows they cannot get what they want most from their job. And based on how I've led you down the path that way, it becomes very, very difficult to say no. The people that do say no, if I dig in further with them, it's all because of their emotional state or because they're lazy. Honestly, they don't want to do the work. Or because they're in denial about how difficult it is to actually make a business successful right now. And so when leaders go into denial, our most common pivot is to try to solve human problems with operational solutions. So it's like when performance dips, the first thing we look for is they need more training. Or we need a new sales process. We got to switch to Medic. We got to switch to Challenger. Or we need a new piece of sales tech, right? No. Those are operational solutions for a human problem. The other thing is this. When motivation dips, it does not indicate a gap in capability. It indicates a gap in motivation. Yet so many leaders' first instinct is that, oh, well, this person was at 93% attainment and then 2 months ago. And then now they're at 82% attainment and they're in the same role as they were that whole time. We need more training. No, like their job requirements haven't changed. They've already shown that they're capable of 93% attainment. You don't suddenly lose your ability to do what you did before overnight. That's not a thing apart from medical conditions that occur, you know? And so there's no logic that supports, oh, motivation dips, it's a capability problem. No, when motivation dips or when performance dips, it's a motivation problem. And motivation is not the result of capability. It's the result of payoff.
A lot to unpack. I want to go back to a bit of a scenario, actually, Phil, coming back onto the life analysis earlier on. So let's say I'm a manager or a leader listening to this, and I've got, let's just say for argument's sake, 2 people that I do the life analysis with, and actually I find that they're likely to probably have completely different lives that they are looking for. As a leader, how do I try and give them both what they want whilst they could be, very, very different things?
Sure. Well, I have to say it's not difficult to look at the facts of what you can offer and assess whether you can give it to them or not. So the actual tactics of this are not difficult at all. The difficult part for a leader is admitting to yourself that you're going to need to go through some change and being willing to go through that change. That's where most of us get knocked off track because the details are the details. Like if someone is going to, let's say that, for example, you live in a flat in London. It's a 1-bedroom flat and you just had your first child. Well, you're going to need to move to a larger flat, right? Or you're going to need to move to a home in the suburbs outside of London. That's going to take a lot more money than what you have now. This is a fact. So if the person says, hey, like for me to feed my child and sleep and have a healthy life, I need a larger living space and that's going to cost X more dollars every year. I need to make more money. Like that need is not something that an employer can negotiate the employee out of. It is just a fact that the employer must accept. And then the employer has to decide, can I make it possible to give this person what they need? That's all just data, right? It's very easy to figure that out. The hard part is admitting it to yourself of what needs to happen next. Yeah.
Cool. Very, very interesting and thought-provoking stuff, this, Phil. And this has obviously led to you recently writing and producing the book Desire-Based Leadership, I believe.
Yes. Here, I'll show you the cover for those who are watching on video.
This is the baby.
So for those who can't see it, who are listening on audio, it's basically a sky blue cover with an ice cream cone on it.
Why the ice cream cone?
This is such a good question. So I gotta say, getting to the cover design was so much harder than writing the book. And partly because, to communicate desire, it's a pretty abstract concept, without making it look like a romance novel on the cover, which was definitely, not what I wanted. So I had to really kind of work with a couple different designers to come up with a good visual concept. And I ended up working with a brilliant woman named Stephanie Finks, and she's the design director for the Harvard Business Review. And she's really good at concept design. And so we were talking about desire, and she said, one way to communicate desire is by giving an image of fulfillment. Another way to communicate it is by giving an image of lack, of something that's incomplete. And so when she sent me this cover that had the ice cream cone with no ice cream, I was like, oh, I get it. Like, when you see an ice cream cone, you want to complete the experience with the ice cream. Now, I mean, of course, I would personally eat a whole box of ice cream cones plain. I have done it before. But ideally, you want to complete the image. And so it became a really good icon for this book, because what I want to entice people to do is open up the book and find out how to get that image completed, basically. Yeah.
Nice. Love it. And what was it that made you even want to write a book on you're clearly very passionate about the topic, but what was it that made you want to write and release the book?
Well, first, because I love leaders, and leadership is really hard, especially right now, and especially in sales, and especially in tech sales, which is where I've spent the concentration of my career. So it was first just an offering of support and help for leaders, but also because I have never, and this is no fault to even the best leaders that I've had, but I've never had a leader in my entire career try to motivate my performance based upon what I wanted. It was always based upon what the company wanted. And I don't want people to be in that position. I don't want people to have to feel like they're wrong or selfish or lazy for centering themselves and their needs in their relationship with employment. I think the age of having employer-centric views of what an employee is for and what business is for is cresting. I think that especially millennials and Gen Zers, who I just love both of those generations as a Gen Xer myself, I think it's incredible that those two generations together are so clearly uninterested in wasting their time in environments that don't bring them closer to what they want. I think it's amazing that they love themselves more than they fear change. And I also think that this is a reality that every leader must contend with, because right now, millennials and Gen Zers are 53% of the global workforce. And by 2035, they're on track to be around 65%. Excuse me, 65% of the global workforce. So anybody that wants to have a successful business, you need to contend with this.
Yeah, you do. We hear that a lot, but just be open to it. As you said, the majority of the workforce is going to be that demographic. So you're absolutely right with what you've said there. I think I'm a millennial anyway. I think I'm not far between the two, but I think it just about in the millennial category. Coming on to hiring now, because I know we've spoken a lot around desire-based leadership in maybe the team that we already have. However, we know that we could be growing, or better yet, we might have done a life analysis with one of our team and we might have helped them get a new role because we can't give them the life that we want. That means we would then have to replace and hire someone else. What are your kind of thoughts on how we hire and attract employees and staff based on your kind of theories around the desire-based leadership?
Well, so my life motivation discovery model was extremely helpful and useful for me when I was having to make hiring decisions. Because if you look at the way most hiring is done right now, about 95% of the effort on the part of the hiring organization is to certify capability fit. About 5% goes to culture fit. And there's almost no attention given to desire fit. And the reason why that's such a huge vulnerability for companies who are hiring is because you could have the best capabilities for the job, and you could even fit well within the culture of your organization, and you could still not get what you needed from this person. Because if the hire cannot get the life they want from the job they have, you will not get their best performance. And so my model fills a major and really critical gap in the way that most hiring is conducted. It's a big blind spot, which has persisted for my entire life, in my entire career. And wanting to help people recover from that blind spot and really make great hires that benefit their business is another big part of why I chose to write this book and publish this methodology.
Brilliant. Love it. And I think it's something, a framework that we might start to implement as well. And not only when hiring, but also with the existing teams. I think it's really, really useful. Kind of moving on to something else you mentioned earlier, and it was quite poignant with what you said, that as great as some of the leaders have been that you've worked with and kind of worked under, I'm sure have been inspiring in many ways, that none of them have ever kind of managed you in a way that was with what the life that you wanted. It was more around the business outcomes. A big shift will be needed and will be required. What do you think needs to happen for us to kind of change that mindset and make that shift happen?
I think leaders have to change their idea and their beliefs about what an employee is for. And, we are very much we're now decades into a very shareholder value mentality of what the existence of a business is about. And a business exists to create value for the shareholders, whether it's a private or publicly traded company. That has been the dominant ethos for at least 40 or 50 years now. That has completely changed the view of the purpose of an employee as well. And that an employee's function and purpose is to deliver value to the shareholder and to the company. And any benefit that the employee gets for that is a secondary concern to the employer. The problem with that is that what the employee gets in exchange for their work will always be the primary concern for the employee. And business outcomes still come from humans. And I've really nailed down this point in the book, and I'm really passionate about this particular point. When, most leaders, most businesses look to products, strategies, and processes as their most sure pathway to meeting and exceeding their goals, right? Not really acknowledging the fact that products and strategies and processes are just inert objects. They're just inventions with no life force of their own. They're just boulders at the bottom of a hill until a human comes along and puts their effort in to move them. And why this is so important to me is because when leaders struggle, just like any other human, our survival instincts get provoked because we're like, oh shit, like my ability to pay my bills and take care of my family and have the life that I want is now in jeopardy because that's dependent upon my people's performance, right? And when your survival instincts are provoked, you're most naturally going to go into denial. And the most common form of leadership denial is to fixate on the things you can control because it brings you comfort. And you can control your products and your processes and your strategies much more easily and readily than you can control your people. So the shift that's necessary that you're asking about is requiring something in particular of revenue leaders and sales leaders that we are not naturally accustomed to. It requires us to center our people more than our business outcomes, and it requires us to employ patience and trust. I understand that this is remarkably difficult for most leaders. However, it is not optional. It's just not optional. The question is not whether it's real. The question is how much time are you going to spend in denial versus how quickly are you going to dive into the reality and get better outcomes.
Brilliant. Love it. I think that's actually a great place to leave as well, because I agree that is the reality of the situation. The question for leaders is basically, are you going to do something about it or not? Very, very simple.
Yeah.
Phil, great episode. A lot of thought-provoking stuff there with regards to desire-based leadership. We will, of course, share a link to the book as well when we post this on social media. So please do check out Desire-Based Leadership. I believe it's available on Amazon and all usual places. And when was the book released, Phil?
October 15th.
Wow. So when this comes out, it will still only be a matter of weeks old. So
Yeah.
get your hands on it. Phil, thank you very much again for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Definitely. And if I can say one more thing, if you resonate with what I'm saying and you're looking for someone to teach or speak at your SKO or your internal conference or do workshops for your team, I would love to be a part of that. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or contact me through philputnam.com.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Phil, been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye.